Hello and welcome to another 12-minute mark where we're coming now pretty close, just a few episodes away from our conclusion, but we're at the highest drama point here. Jesus has been betrayed. He's been given all the prophecies of the betrayal that he would experience from his followers, and in our last episode we saw Peter disowning Jesus, and now Peter is alone. They've gone through, the Jews have gone through this sometimes called a kangaroo court, very illegal proceedings to now move Jesus on to the next step. They don't have the authority to execute him. They've got to now take him to Pontius Pilate. And so that brings us then right here to chapter 15. Again, we've seen that the theme has been the cost of radical discipleship, and only a few have really demonstrated that. Really the woman who anoints him, the anonymous woman who anoints him with oil, she gave all she had. The widow in the temple giving her last 2 coins, she gave all she had. The few episodes or little pictures we have of the cost of discipleship really come from mostly anonymous people who are simply servants, and all those people who were supposed to be kind of with Jesus full time. And the religious people, they're the ones who are not making the cut in terms of the cost of the discipleship. And so in 15, it starts, very early in the morning. They've got to get this going quick, which is a big deal. The chief priests and the teachers of the law, and then they had the whole Sanhedrin. They reached a decision, and they tied Jesus up, and they led him away, handing him over to Pilate. "Are you the king of the Jews?" Pilate asked. Asked him, if he's the king of the Jews. Page turn. "Yes, it is as you say," Jesus replied. The chief priest accused him of many things, so again Pilate asked him, "Aren't you going to answer? See how many things they're accusing you of?" But Jesus still made no reply, and Pilate was amazed. Now it was the custom of the feast to release a prisoner from whom the people requested. A man called Barabbas was in prison with the insurrectionists. He had committed murder in the uprising. The crowd came up and asked Pilate to do for them what he usually did. "Do you want me to release to you the king of the Jews?" asked Pilate, knowing it was out of envy that the chief priests had handed him over to him. But the chief priests stirred up the crowd to have them ask to have Barabbas released instead. "What shall I do then with the one you call the king of the Jews?" Pilate asked them. "Crucify him," they shouted. "Why? What crime has he committed?" But they just shouted all the louder, "Crucify him," wanting to satisfy the crowd. Pilate released Barabbas and had Jesus flogged and handed over to be crucified. This section here, there's, again, is where the Jews are technically taking him over now to the Roman authorities to see if they can get Jesus crucified, but they're still in it. It's not like they've delegated completely over to him. They want to make sure that they're still involved and that they see this all the way through. They do this very early in the morning. It was said that you can never get anything done in Rome before 10 a.m., so they really pushed and had to get this done early. And perhaps they even had certain people in the crowd show up, to make this happen. And Pilate asks a question. Pilate has a difficult job. He's just a Roman, Gentile governor, and his job is to maintain order in Judea, which is very difficult. It mentions Barabbas was someone who was who had committed murder in the uprising. And there's all kinds of uprising. It was a constant uprising there. And Pilate had to walk the line of maintaining order, yet giving the people some of their religious freedoms. And he basically was a scoffer of the Jews, and he mocked them, and he had done some things that had really set them off. Matter of fact, he had maybe 3 strikes against him, things that he had done that really upset the rulers and caused more unrest. And so his superiors, he's on thin ice with his own superiors. Because, you know, if we keep having to send in more soldiers, and the more people we have to kill, the less revenue we'll have in taxes, the more we have to, the more this area is high maintenance for Rome, the less they're able to take new lands far away, etc., etc. It's just a political thing for them, and Pilate really underestimated just how fervent and tenacious the Jews were in what they were going to do. So he's politically on very thin ice, and yet he's still kind of poking fun at them by saying, you know, referring to Jesus as the King of the Jews, that this is really your king, and that's just a goad at them. And Pilate waits for Jesus. You know, he's going to give Jesus his fair shake here and say, you know, what's the real crime here? What crime is deserving death? And in the other Gospels, we get some longer dialogues here, but it's the fact that Jesus isn't going to defend himself. He knows what's going to happen. And now it says that Pilate is amazed. You know, we've seen everyone has been amazed so far at what Jesus has done because of his teaching and his miracles. But now Pilate is also amazed. But he's amazed that Jesus remains silent. Amazed that seemingly this man has no fear. And Pilate probably has heard enough about Jesus. He knows enough of who he is to know that he's probably innocent, that he hasn't really committed any crime. And so then we get this little thing, this little fact that, hey, it just happens to be Passover. And at Passover, it's the tradition to release one of the prisoners. And so, you know, if you're reading this story for the first time, you think, oh, good. Jesus is the obvious choice here, that he will be released. I mean, he was just the grand marshal of the parade at the beginning of the week as he comes into town, and he's done nothing but good, and now we found this loophole. It just seems, you know, destiny that now is the time when we release a prisoner, so it's all going to have a happy ending because of that. But we see, you know, it's not tradition, it's not the the plans of man that will see the Lord's work go forth. This is in God's plan, and Barabbas is released. He is someone who was probably a zealot, probably, the murder charge he had probably was not against his own people, but was probably leading in the revolt against Rome. So he could have possibly been something of a hero to them. And Pilate, again, due to some of the pressure and the fact that here's an example of how a political system can wear down someone. You know, it's a corrupt system, and in a corrupt system, only corrupt people rise to the top. That's the challenge here. And he basically turns leadership over to the mob. What would you have me do with the one you call the King of the Jews? What would you have me do? Now, it's probably a legitimate thing for leadership to of course, listen to the people and to kind of know where they are, but here he pretty much just gives up. He's tired of messing with these people, even though he knows that Jesus has done nothing deserving death. So what shall I do with the one you call King of the Jews? Crucify him, he says. Why? What crime has he committed? You know, he's trying to, again, follow up with them. But they just shout louder, crucify him. And then one of the, again, sad sort of anti-leadership moves, wanting to please the crowd. which really is the mob. This isn't the same crowd that's been following Jesus. This is a full-blown mob. This is the same, probably the same group that came and arrested him at the night. They're the ones probably stirring this up. And so he wants to satisfy the crowd. He releases Barabbas, and then he has Jesus flogged and hands him over to be crucified. So what we see here at the end is a shared, really, responsibility. It's we see here both the religious system, the Jews who had their first trial against him and said, this is new wine, we can't handle it, he doesn't fit in our system. And then you take it to the political system of the day, represented by Pilate, and they can't do right either by Jesus. So it's just sort of a, he's been preaching his own kingdom that's completely opposite, and whenever the other kingdom, the world's kingdom, comes against, it looks like the world's kingdom will win here. They cannot tolerate his kingdom. And so we go here straightway into the crucifixion for next time. We'll finish, we'll look at the crucifixion, which is a completely different thing that we might normally think about. When we think of the crucifixion, we might ask, what word comes to your mind when you think of crucifixion? And the word that Mark keeps using is probably not the word we would use. So we'll look forward to that in our next episode of 12 Minute Mark. God bless you.